Hi, my name is Darren Davidson and I'm a graduate student here at the University of Arizona in Tucson, and I'd like to introduce you to the Underwood Family Sonoran Landscape Laboratory. It was designed by award-winning landscape architect Christy Tenike, and it's really an excellent example of what can be done with architecture and landscape architecture. The design has 5 guiding principles, which are water sustainability, reduction of urban flooding, which Tucson actually has quite a bit of, mitigation of the urban heat island effect, reconnecting with nature, and finally, the creation of an interpretive oasis. These 5 principles are expressed through 5 biomes of the Sonoran Desert, which is something that we learn about in our classes here. So if you come with me, I'll show you how we bring to life these 5 guiding principles. Okay, the first principle, water sustainability, can be seen here at our pond, which represents a desert wetland. During the late summer months in Tucson is when we get most of our precipitation for the year in the form of really heavy rainstorms. And we're able to capture a lot of that water off of our roof into an 11,000 gallon cistern. We also collect water from the air conditioning condensate from the building, some gray water from the building, and from a university drinking water well. So now, when the 11,000 gallon cistern is full, the overflow runs down this downspout and into our pond. When the pond is full, that water overflows into our desert riparian area, which has 3 microbasins. These microbasins are planted with native vegetation, and when the water flows into that area, it can actually percolate back into the ground, which diverts water from going into the city's utility system. And that helps with the second principle, which is reducing urban flooding. Instead of the water hitting the roofs and the parking lot and being diverted into the streets which flood, the water goes back into the ecosystem, which is really a healthier situation. So this area here where I'm standing at the top of the garden is where we have the Upper Sonoran Desert represented with native trees, native shrubs, grasses, and flowering plants. And this whole area helps with the capture of runoff from the adjacent parking lot. So when talking about all of this native vegetation, that takes us to principle number 3, which is mitigating the urban heat island effect. Okay, so with all of this native vegetation that fills up the garden, we're able to accomplish principle number 3, which is mitigating the urban heat island effect. That's something that happens in urban areas when the sun heats up materials of high thermal mass. Those materials then release that heat throughout the night, and the city isn't able to cool to normal temperatures. So by simply adding more vegetation that provides shade to an area, we're able to mitigate the effect, and it creates a much more pleasant environment to be in during the day and at night. Speaking of a more enjoyable place to be, that brings me to the 4th design principle, which is reconnecting with nature. This garden was built on a former parking lot, and we've been able to increase wildlife habitat and biodiversity, which is illustrated through predation. We actually have predator bird species that use the garden area to hunt and feed themselves, which is a good sign of a healthy ecosystem. So now that takes me to the 5th design principle, which is the creation of an interpretive oasis. As I mentioned, the gardens represent 5 of the biotic communities of the Sonoran Desert, and if you look throughout the garden, you'll see signs with educational information telling you a little bit more about the areas. So that makes the garden not only a nice place to come and relax or meet up with people, but also a learning laboratory where you can learn more about the region in which you live. So far, I've mentioned 3 of the 5 biomes, the desert wetland, the desert riparian, and the Upper Sonoran area. So now I'm standing in the 4th, which is the Mesquite Bosque. This area is a major transition area from the parking lot to the buildings, and we have seating, and there's a really nice canopy provided by the mesquite trees that provide shade and cooler temperatures in the summer months. And then this is adjacent to the 4th microbasin, which is an extension of the desert riparian area. So behind me is the canyon, and that's the 5th biome. The high walls of the building emulate the high walls of rock that you would find in a desert canyon. The plants that grow in that area are used to having less sunlight and cooler temperatures than the desert plants that you find out in the open areas. Okay, that wraps up the tour. Thanks for joining me, and if you'd like to learn more about the technical aspects of the garden, click on the link below.